All right, welcome to coaching. So we're sitting here today with Courtney Ryan. She's got one of the coolest stories that I've heard maybe in my lifetime. We're going to have an opportunity to hear about it. So she's sitting here with me. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. The first thing I want to go through with you, because it's a little bit more of a difficult introduction than we normally do. You know, I could list off to our audience all the things you've done, but you've had some involvement in different sports. You've had some involvement doing different things and helping different organizations. So I want our audience to be able to kind of get your perspective of your background, you know, before I throw in your details. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your upbringing in terms of where you're born. I know you're born in San Diego, and what it was like for you coming up through sports, how you got involved with sports, what was your original attraction to sports, and how that kind of blossomed in your early years.
Okay. Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me and including us adaptive athletes to your guys' movement. We really appreciate it. But as far as my upbringing, I started playing soccer at a very young age. I basically grew up on the soccer field watching my older siblings play. And at about the time I was 4 years old, I started playing myself, and I just got hooked to it. By the time I was 7, I was playing on a pretty competitive club team where all the girls were about 10 years old. So they're a little bit older, definitely taller than me. The uniform never fit me, looked like a dress, but we made it work. But all through my career, I played in high school as well. I made the varsity team at Coronado High School, where I attended in San Diego and grew up in San Diego. The few years that I was attending the school and playing on the varsity team, I had a couple awards. I got MVP my first year, Freshman of the Year my first year, and then Player of the Year my senior year. So I was doing really well. And my senior year and junior year, obviously, I was starting to really focus and look into collegiate programs. Okay. And at that time, I got an email from the head coach at Metro State University of Denver. And I got invited to go do an official visit with them. Okay. And I fell in love with the city, fell in love with the school, I fell in love with the team, and signed that contract before I left, stating that I was going to get a full scholarship while attending Metro State. So I had a lot of momentum going into my freshman year. I was excited, ready for this transition, and got to my freshman year. I ended up being a starter the first game, was a starter throughout that whole year, and we did really well that first year at making it to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. We ended up losing to Seattle Pacific University, so it was a very tough loss. But as you know, we were hungry and ready for that following year, my sophomore year. Again, we did really well. We made it to the Elite Eight, I believe, that year, and ended up losing again. So again, same thing, trained even harder that summer, had a trainer, moved back to San Diego so I can get back in shape. Came back my junior year, probably in the best shape throughout my career in college, high school, and I was feeling really good.
Okay, and I want to cut you off there before we pick up. So
yeah.
We've learned, you grew up in San Diego,
mm-hmm.
You went to Coronado High School, which is ironic because I also went to a Coronado High School in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay,
Las Vegas,
okay,
San Diego.
okay.
Through your years in high school, 2007, right? Is that around your junior year? High school, 11th grade year?
Junior year, 2007,
okay,
yes.
2007, you end up winning some awards, like you said. You end up getting MVP of the league. Your senior season, your Player of the Year. You're building this momentum. You go to Metro State in Denver. And your first year, you played in 25 games. And then your second year, you end up playing in 24 games, but also breaking the assist record as a defender with 15 assists, right? That's something you end up doing?
Yes.
Oh, you're there? So
yes.
You're building this momentum. You're going through these experiences. And before we get into kind of what your junior year in college entails, I want you to share a little bit about the natural transition for you from high school to college as a soccer player. Like, what were some things that you thought you might have to deal with? What were some things that you definitely dealt with? Were there any hardships? Were there any amazing things that you want to recall in those first couple years?
The first few years, it definitely is a hard transition, I think, for a lot of people at that age, going from living in an environment where your parents are kind of molding you and helping you out a lot to an environment where you're pretty much on your own, where you have these expectations not only as an athlete, but as a student.
Okay.
So initially going in, I was very excited to be an athlete. I forgot a little bit about that student part, right? And obviously I knew going in you had to maintain a certain grade point average, which I was able to do. But I definitely didn't plan or didn't successfully prepare myself for the school aspect. Right. So my freshman year, it was a tough transition, being on my own, not having my mom around to help me with my assignments, because she was really helpful in high school. She would read over my papers, proofread, all that good stuff. So that was a tough transition. Not only that, but playing at that high level, I had never done anything like that. I had never played at a level where you're doing 2-a-days for 3 weeks. Where you're basically training 7 days out of the week. So it is physically exhausting. And I was able to push through, and I think that was something that was really encouraging and motivating for myself that freshman year. When I was able to get over that first year, and how well I did as well. I was a freshman. I was doing really well. Made it to the Final Four my freshman year, so I had a lot of momentum, and that really encouraged me to do that much better, not only in athletics but also in school.
Okay. And in college sports, in your opinion, in your experience, how much, if you had to put it on a percentage scale of 100, and you were dividing it up between these two things, how much would you say you being able to go with that kind of transition, playing at a higher level, playing around people who are older than you, stronger than you, potentially taller than you because they've been there longer when you're a freshman, how much of it is mental and how much of it was your physical talent that you had coming in that was able to allow you to start and be so successful as a freshman and sophomore in college?
Honestly, I would say it's probably like 80% mental and 20% physical for me, because I've always been a smaller, petite woman playing at this level. So I never was fearful of being the smaller player or being less. So I was always a very aggressive player because of that. So I kind of, bridged that gap because of my height. So I would definitely say it was more of a mental game, because like you said, you are playing with girls that are older than you, that have been around at the collegiate level for 4 years now, and that they have these expectations for you coming in even as a freshman, that you have to match their expectation, you have to match their intensity, and that can be very, very overwhelming initially. So definitely it was a mental fatigue for me. Physically, like I mentioned earlier, it was hard because you are training a lot more than what I was doing beforehand, but you have an entire team backing you up and supporting you and motivating you to continue to work hard throughout the season, so that really helps and encourages you.
And that's so crucial. That's a thing that we talk about so often when we're talking to people, who have achieved at a high level, who've played in college, like, the concept, you almost don't realize how much a college team becomes a secondary family for you, right? Like, the support system, the place to go to, the people to hang out with. It's something that we don't see, right? A lot of times when we're in high school, and then when we go away from the college experience, it's something that we don't realize until it's gone, how beneficial that can be. So for those who have any kind of interest in playing collegiate sports, I'm always pushing them, like, it's something you should try. It's something that, even if it's for 2 years, you should definitely dive into. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. Like you said, they are my family and still are my family. I can still call or text any of these girls and expect them to respond and be there when I need them. Yeah. Obviously, coming into my junior year was when I needed them the most, because that was one of my hardest transitions. Right. But going back to my story, like my sophomore year, you mentioned, I had a lot of momentum. I had the school record for most assists for a defender. I also received first team All American in our league, which was an incredible honor to be an All American first team. So again, coming into my junior year, I was pumped. I was excited and I was ready. I'd gone through my preseason just fine. I had passed all my fitness tests with no problem. and we were traveling to Grand Junction that day, and I had woken up one morning and my legs had felt numb and tingly. And I figured, oh, it's probably just fatigue, playing at this high level. Right. It'll subside, it'll pass. So we ended up driving to Grand Junction in our bus, which is about a 5-hour drive, and throughout that entire trip, my legs still felt numb and tingly, and they just felt weird and really weak. But again, I just figured, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to say anything to my trainers because I want to play.
Right.
I want to play this game.
For sure.
So we get to the facility. I'm warming up, still feel a little off. Now I'm starting to get back pain. And about 20 minutes into the game, I was playing forward, which is not something that I'm not used to, but we had another teammate that was injured, so they had pushed me up to the left forward position. One of my teammates passed a through ball to me. I was running for it, and the player slide tackled me from behind, clipped my legs. I flew up in the air, and as I came down, I landed on my back. And at the time I landed on my back, I had a blood clot burst in my spinal cord. And when it burst, it severed some nerves in my spinal cord. So now, at the time, I didn't know what was going on. It felt like somebody literally stabbed me in the back. I was in excruciating pain that it got to the point where my body just shut down and I went into shock. So I don't really remember much when I was at the field, but fortunately my parents were in town visiting from San Diego, so that was a huge blessing to have my parents there at this time. But I did get rushed to the hospital, and they did all the testing, because I did come in complaining that I had no sensation in my legs. So obviously their initial reaction is spinal cord injury. So I did all the initial tests, and come to find out I had some nerves severed at the level of the T8, T9 region. So they told me that I was considered complete paraplegic at the level of T8, T9, meaning I was completely paralyzed from my belly button down. Okay. So initially, when I heard that news, I thought, oh, okay, this is temporary. Right. I've had injuries in my past. I've had minor knee injuries playing soccer, minor ankle sprains in college. I figured, okay, let's rehabilitate. Let's do this. So fortunately, I ended up getting transferred to a rehab hospital called Craig, which is the top of the line rehabilitation hospital for spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and stroke patients. Okay. So I got there, and still I had the expectation that, okay, I'm going to leave this place walking. Okay. Well, months and months of recovery, months and months of physical therapy, months of exhaustion, frustration, sadness, you name it, I was going through. I was leaving the hospital in a wheelchair. Okay. So that's when the realization started to hit, and the idea of what the doctors were telling me, that you're probably never going to walk again. That's when it started to really sink in for me, and I was having an identity crisis. Like I said, I had been playing soccer from the age of 4 up until I was 19 years old. That was my identity. I was an athlete. So now I was starting from complete scratch and realizing, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing now. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know if I can still be an athlete. So at that time, I tried to stay in Denver for a little bit, and like I mentioned, a lot of the girls in the team were incredibly supportive and really helped with my transition. And to this day, I'm still thankful for them and their family for kind of bringing me under their wings at that time when I needed them the most. And it was just getting to be emotionally too hard to still be around them and still be around the sport that I was missing, soccer. Yeah. So I decided to move back to San Diego, which is probably the best decision that I made at that time. It was very hard because I was enjoying the fact that I was independent, living on my own, doing college, I was doing all that stuff, having fun, but at the back of my head, I knew that I had to go home to help with this transition. Right. So I ended up moving back to San Diego, and within that short year I was in San Diego, a lot had changed. My family, my parents were a huge part of that, because they were the ones that really introduced me and initiated me and pushed me to start getting out into the world again and trying new things. So they actually had a family friend who's involved in an organization called Challenged Athletes Foundation. And they provide grants for adaptive athletes who are looking to get into sports, because like the chair that I use for basketball can cost anywhere between $3,000 to $7,000. So it's a very, very, very expensive sport, and unfortunately health insurances don't cover these because they're considered recreational. They're not a necessity. So a lot of these people rely on this Challenged Athletes Foundation to provide them grants so that they can continue playing at the highest level. So they all, not only do they do that, but they also have a mentoring program where they introduce you to a mentor that has a similar disability and has had a similar transition. So I was introduced to a woman named Erica Davis who had been in the Paralympics for hand cycling, and she's also does race chair, or the racing chair, and all sorts of different sports. She's very involved. So she introduced me to a lot of different things, and that's when I started realizing that that identity of an athlete can potentially come back.
Sure.
So I remember the first time she brought me to a wheelchair basketball practice. And I was very skeptical because initially I thought, like, oh, it's wheelchair basketball. It's going to be really slow. It's going to be pretty pathetic. And it's going to be all about, oh, look at them. They're so inspirational because they're out there and doing things. But then I went there and that just all changed and completely was out the window. These guys were athletic. These guys and girls were athletic. They were ramming it into each other. It was loud. You know, people are making scoop layups. People are making three-pointers. Like, this is a sport. So initially I saw that. I saw a guy fall from out of his wheelchair, and instantly I was like, yep, that's the sport for me. Sign me up. So I got signed up to play with the San Diego Hammers, which was a recreational team, a development team for young men and women. And my first tournament, we ended up traveling to Arizona. And this is where Coach Pete Hughes saw me. We were playing a game. We were down by 1 point. One of my teammates puts up a three-pointer. He misses. I was able to get the rebound. Boom, put it up, and I won the game. Mind you, this is my first game playing ever, wheelchair basketball. I was starting, I made a game-winning shot, and I was super shocked.
It's meant to be.
It was meant to be, exactly. At that time, I made the shot. The head coach for the University of Arizona women's wheelchair basketball team went up to my parents because obviously he was looking for the people in the stands that were freaking out the most, because he knew that's probably her parents. And sure enough, it was my father, mother, and sister, who are still to this day my #1 fans, biggest supporters. And he offered me a scholarship right then and there to become a Wildcat. Boom. So again, I was back on track. I was a student athlete. I was ready to go, and I was extremely excited to have this opportunity in my life, not just to be able to call myself a student athlete, but also to help with the coping that I had been going through.
And on scholarship, too.
And on scholarship, It was fun, and I learned a lot from there. My first year, I ended up getting a tryout for the USA team. I made that team.
2014?
That was 2012. 2012, had a tryout for the US team, made the team to compete at the 2014 World Championships. We ended up getting about 4th, and at that time I was still kind of going through a lot, and I don't think I was necessarily ready to compete at that level mentally, because again, US ball is right up there with collegiate, and maybe even that much more intense and competitive. My coaches expected you putting up 500 shots a day, and it's not just the physical training that they're having you put, it's the nutritional. They want you to blog your everything, you know, so it was a tough transition. So I took a few years off, but I'm getting to a point now where I'm ready to get back into it. So I'm trying out in January in hopes that I'll make the Parapans team, and then the main goal is for 2020 Tokyo.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got Olympic goals happening here. I like this. Okay. So, wow, that's a super intense story. So, you go from 4 years old, you're playing soccer, you have your work up through high school, you have some success, you get your original college scholarship, you have some more success, you go through an absolutely devastating injury, and you're not really sure what you're going to do. Like you described it as having an identity crisis. You get this happenstance thing introduced to you. You know, you go into the basketball gym, you originally think it's going to be something you're not into. One day changes your whole perspective in two different ways, right? You have an injury you're not expecting, it changes your whole life, and another day you step into a gym and you watch some people play and it changes your whole life. And to me, that story just reeks of the perfect lesson of being able to take each day individually, find the lessons in it, and move forward from there. So, wow.
Yeah.
Shot at the Olympics, huh?
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully. And like not what we had mentioned earlier, like the transition and how wheelchair basketball helped me in that way, but it also helped me find my community again. We talk about how teammates are family.
Sure.
This community is family to me because they helped me and they have this understanding that we all have because we all live with a disability.
Right.
So it was just incredible.
So your craft at this point is this basketball. You know, we're sitting in a basketball gym right now. We have the Shoot 360 facility behind us, and it takes a lot of mental toughness. It takes hours. It takes dedication. And that can go for any craft, right? Like whether it's sports, if it's business, if it's relationships, like that's something in your opinion that can be applied to any craft. Like anybody who's in a similar situation or feels like they can resonate with your situation or feels like they're having any kind of hardship, like what is the advice that you would give them to be able to figure out what their craft is and move forward into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think something that people need to understand is that you just need to listen to the story that people are telling you. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to relate because we both play sports or anything like you just said, but we may relate because you've also had a hardship that you've had to go through. You've also had family that has been really supportive. You've had transitions in your life where you were at the top and then you ended up at the bottom. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we relate at a physical level, but we can relate at a mental level. We can relate because of our history, and we can relate because we've overcome a lot of bullshit, and we're climbing our way back up to the top.
Geez, this is something people need to hear for sure. So what's next for you? You're getting back into training right now. You're trying to make the Parapans team. You want to take a shot at Tokyo 2020. What other kind of things do you do in your life outside of basketball at this point?
I'm also a personal trainer.
Okay.
So I have a personal training certification for specialized population. So I try to adapt certain exercises that you see in CrossFit or everyday situations and adapt it to movements that we're able to do. I'd also like to think I'm a huge advocate. I really try to advocate adaptive sports to younger kids to showcase how helpful and where it can take you in life, and that the opportunities are limitless when you get involved. So I really help out. Like just recently, there was a young gentleman who we trained over the summer here at Shoot 360, and now he is at University of Arizona taking on the Wildcat badge, you know, taking on the Wildcat flag. So that's also something that I do now, is just kind of advocate and help the younger generation.
Strong.
Mm-hmm. And then I started a women's wheelchair basketball program, and we're the only women's wheelchair basketball team in California. And we compete all over the U.S. 2 years in a row, we've gotten second place, second in the nation, so we've lost the championship game. Last year, we lost by 1 point in overtime. What? So it was a hell of a game. But yeah.
Going to the finals, right? How many teams usually participate?
It varies for the women's division. But last year, we actually hosted in Carson, California, my wife and I. And there were 9 teams.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you guys making it to the finals, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You're about to get over that hump, huh?
Again, that's what we're trying. We're trying. It's the second year in a row we got second. I mean, each year it's getting closer, so hopefully we'll get better.
Okay. So I definitely want to make sure that we get some footage of your workout today, so that's something that we're going to do. You guys will be able to check out at the end of the video, but we usually like to close with 3 quick hits. So the way it works is I'll spit out a subject or a topic or a question, and then you, within the first 5-10 seconds, like first thought that comes to your head, you bang it out like that. Okay? So
all right.
Let me know when you're ready.
Ready.
All right. Most challenging thought that you've ever had?
Most challenging thought. Overcoming my disability and ignoring the stereotypes that people have about disability.
Okay.
And continuing to challenge them.
Okay. Most special moments since your injury?
Putting on a USA team jersey and getting married.
Okay. What keeps you going each day?
My family, my wife, and basketball.
Okay. Strong stuff. So that's it. We're here with Courtney Ryan. 1,000 different awesome awards she's won, 1,000 different awesome things she's won. But the main thing we want to take away is being able to find a way to relate. Today I heard a lot of stuff that I didn't know. You have a super special story, and I want to keep finding ways to get this out to the rest of the world. So let's do it. We always close with a handshake and a hug. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you again.
Do it again soon.
Yeah.
If you want to see more interviews like this, subscribe to Chris P. Austin Coaching on YouTube or any of our social medias. We'll see you soon.